Viviane adjusted the delicate lace of her wedding dress, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric across her shoulders. She could hear the distant murmur of guests arriving, polite laughter, and the subtle shuffle of servers carrying trays of champagne. Her heart raced, not from excitement, but from the sharp edge of anxiety that accompanied the thought of what she was about to do. She glanced at her reflection in the tall mirror, and for a moment, she hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. The elegant gown clung perfectly, the subtle shimmer of the beads catching the light, and yet beneath the beauty, she felt a fragile tension that no dress could hide. Andrew appeared in the doorway, his suit perfectly tailored, dark and commanding, as though the room had been designed to frame him in power. He paused for a brief second to glance at Viviane, and she noticed the faint twitch of a smile tugging at his lips, subtle, almost imperceptible. It made her stomach flutter in a way she had not expected. "You look striking," he said, his voice low, steady, carrying a hint of admiration she did not expect. Viviane turned to face him fully, raising an eyebrow. "Thank you. I could say the same, though you make it seem effortless," she replied, her tone light but edged with nervous curiosity. Andrew stepped closer, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. "Effortless suits me. But tonight, it seems you are the one who shines," he said softly, his eyes lingering on hers longer than necessary. She felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "I think we are both playing roles we are not used to," she said, the words almost slipping out before she caught herself. She noticed the small crease of his brow, as if he was weighing something unspoken, as if he felt the same unspoken tension. Their conversation was interrupted by the approaching murmur of the officiant and the first guests taking their seats. Viviane smoothed her hands over the folds of her dress, trying to calm the sudden flurry of nerves. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Andrew tilted his head slightly, a shadow of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I am. Ready or not, this is our moment," he said, his voice low enough that it seemed meant only for her. They walked side by side down the long, polished aisle, their steps measured, almost synchronized, as though the universe had briefly aligned to make their movements mirror each other. Guests whispered politely as they passed, but Viviane noticed little of them. All she could focus on was Andrew, the strong presence beside her, the way his hand brushed lightly against hers when they passed close, leaving a fleeting spark of warmth in its wake. At the altar, they faced each other, the officiant's words floating over them, ceremonial and formal. Viviane could feel her pulse hammering in her ears as she glanced up at Andrew. For the first time, his dark eyes seemed less like a wall and more like an invitation, a silent question that made her breath catch. Andrew, take you, Viviane, to be my lawful wife," he said, his voice steady but carrying a warmth that belied the cold formality of the ceremony. "I promise to honor you, to stand beside you, and to face whatever comes with you." Viviane felt a lump form in her throat as the words reached her. She had come here expecting obligation, strategy, and necessity, but hearing him speak with such careful sincerity made her chest ache. "Viviane, take you, Andrew, as my husband," she replied, her voice soft, trembling slightly. "I will support you, stand with you, and face the future with you, no matter what comes." There was a pause, a quiet stillness, and then Andrew leaned just slightly closer, enough that Viviane could feel the warmth of his presence. His lips hovered near hers for the briefest moment, teasingly close, as if inviting her to meet him halfway. Viviane's eyes widened, and she could feel her breath catch in her chest. She wanted to pull back, to remind herself that this was all a contract, a game. Yet part of her leaned forward instinctively, drawn by the magnetism she could not deny. Instead of a full kiss, he brushed his lips gently against her cheek, a whisper of intimacy, a subtle acknowledgement that this moment could be more than ceremony. Viviane felt a shiver run through her body, her heart racing, and a quiet, unexpected smile tugged at her lips. The officiant continued the formalities, and they completed the vows, the contract officially binding them together. Yet in that fleeting second of near contact, something had shifted between them. There was tension, intrigue, and a subtle warmth neither could deny. As they walked back down the aisle together, side by side, Viviane stole a glance at Andrew. He caught her gaze and offered a faint, almost playful smile. It was brief, but it spoke volumes. It hinted at battles yet to come, tension yet unresolved, and perhaps the quiet beginnings of something far more complicated than a simple arrangement. Viviane knew then that this marriage would be more than a contract, though she refused to admit it aloud. The spark between them, subtle and electric, had been ignited, and neither of them would be able to ignore it for long. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of their shared apartment, casting warm gold across the polished wooden floors and the soft cream walls. Viviane moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing breakfast, her mind unusually restless. Living with Andrew felt strange, a mix of comfort and unease that she could not fully describe. Every glance, every touch, seemed charged with electricity she could neither ignore nor fully understand. Andrew appeared from the bedroom in his tailored shirt and trousers, looking every bit the confident, commanding CEO he was. He paused as he saw Viviane arranging plates on the counter, the soft morning light catching her hair and the delicate lines of her dress. "You're up early," he said, voice low but carrying an undertone of admiration. "I like to start before the chaos begins," Viviane replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Her heart fluttered unexpectedly as he stepped closer, the subtle warmth of his presence brushing against her. Andrew's dark eyes lingered on her, assessing, curious. "Not bad," he said quietly, leaning slightly on the counter beside her. "Though I think you might be trying too hard to impress me." Viviane arched an eyebrow. "Trying to impress you?" she asked, a teasing smile tugging at her lips. "I wouldn't dream of it. You seem perfectly confident in your ability to charm without any effort." He smirked faintly. "Confidence is different from effort. But you are remarkable, even when you try not to be." His gaze held hers, intense and lingering, and Viviane felt her breath catch. Breakfast passed in a mixture of polite conversation and stolen glances, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. Viviane noticed the subtle ways Andrew's hand brushed against hers as he passed by, the warmth lingering longer than it should. Andrew, in turn, found himself stealing looks at her how she moved, the small, graceful gestures, the spark of intelligence in her eyes. Their daily routines were a mix of subtle conflict and playful tension. He teased her about leaving dishes in the sink. She playfully scolded him for making too many early morning calls in the apartment. One evening, as Viviane reviewed business documents on the sofa, Andrew appeared behind her with a glass of wine. "You've been at this for hours," he said softly. "I think you need a break." "I don't need a babysitter," Viviane replied, trying to sound firm though her cheeks warmed and her heart beat faster at the proximity. Andrew leaned closer, setting the glass beside her. His fingers brushed against hers. "I'm not babysitting," he murmured. "I'm making sure you don't work yourself to exhaustion." His dark eyes locked on hers, and for a moment, she wanted to lean in, close the space between them, but she held back. As the days passed, a misunderstanding began to brew. Andrew's female colleague, Elena, visited the apartment one morning under the guise of discussing a business partnership. Viviane had gone to the kitchen to fetch coffee and returned just in time to see Andrew laughing, his arm brushing lightly against Elena's shoulder as he leaned toward her to show a document. The casual intimacy in his posture made Viviane's chest tighten. "Andrew," Viviane's voice was soft, but sharp with suspicion. He turned immediately, expression shifting from casual to alert. "Viviane, this is Elena, one of my colleagues. She's just here for the documents," he said quickly. Viviane crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "It looks a little more than that," she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the sting of jealousy and uncertainty. Andrew stepped closer, gently taking her hands. "It is nothing like that," he said, his voice low and steady. "I would never. I'm not like that. You have to trust me." Viviane looked up at him, her chest still tight. She wanted to believe him, and she felt the tension in the space between them, frustration, desire. and the subtle acknowledgement that there was more than just contract or obligation building. Between them, I want to trust you, she admitted softly. The morning air was crisp as Viviane entered the office Andrew had arranged in their shared apartment, sunlight filtering through the large windows that framed the city below. She carried a folder of documents, aware that today would not be ordinary. There had been a series of suspicious emails and calls in recent days, cryptic messages that hinted at corporate sabotage or worse. Vivian's chest tightened as she approached Andrew, who was already reviewing a laptop at the sleek desk, his dark eyes focused, his jaw tense. "Morning," she said cautiously, placing the folder beside him. Her hands trembled slightly despite her effort to appear calm. Andrew looked up, meeting her gaze with a reassuring, almost protective expression. "Morning," he said softly. "I've been going through the numbers and the contracts. Something isn't right. There's a leak, and someone is trying to exploit our arrangement for their gain." Vivian's heart sank. "A leak?" she asked, voice low. "Do you think it's someone from the company?" He nodded, running a hand through his hair, possibly. "Or it could be someone close, waiting for the perfect opportunity. They know we're married and assume we're distracted. They're underestimating you, and they're underestimating me, but together we're stronger." Viviane swallowed. A mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through her. "Stronger? How?" she asked quietly. Andrew stepped closer, his presence grounding her in a way that was both reassuring and unnervingly intimate. "By trusting each other," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "By relying on each other. We can't let them manipulate us. Not you. Not me. Not our lives." Her gaze softened, and for a brief moment, the formal tension between them melted into something warmer. "I don't know if I can trust anyone, even you," she admitted, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Andrew reached out, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "You can trust me," he murmured. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Viviane felt her heart flutter. There was a vulnerability in his words, a sincerity she had not fully allowed herself to acknowledge before. "And if they try something?" she asked, her voice small. "Then I'll protect you," he said firmly, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Whatever it takes." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp chime from the laptop. Viviane leaned over, glancing at the screen. A new email had appeared, its subject line simple but chilling. "We know everything. Be careful." Her stomach dropped. "They're watching," she whispered. Andrew's hand tightened slightly on her shoulder, a subtle anchor in the storm of fear. "Exactly. And that's why we work together. Step by step, we'll uncover who's behind this before they can do real damage." As the day progressed, they pored over financial reports, contracts, and emails, side by side, their proximity unavoidable. Andrew's protective instincts were evident in the way he positioned himself so that Viviane always felt shielded, how he would subtly place himself between her and the computer screen, even while leaning over to point out discrepancies. At one point, Viviane dropped a pen, and Andrew's hand was on it instantly, lifting it from the floor and brushing against her fingers. She felt the warmth of his touch linger, and for a moment, her focus shifted from the corporate threat to the thrum of her own pulse. "Careful," he said softly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You can't afford mistakes today." Viviane looked up at him, her chest tightening not from fear but from the intensity of his gaze. I know," she whispered, the subtle tension between them palpable. Hours later, in the dim glow of the office lamp as the city outside darkened, they finally found a lead, a suspicious set of transactions linked to a rival company and a third-party consultant. Viviane leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. "We found something," she said, her voice trembling slightly with relief. Andrew's eyes softened, and he reached out, lightly brushing a strand of hair from her face again. "You did most of the work," he said, voice low, almost intimate. I admire how sharp you are, Viviane. More than I expected." Viviane felt her cheeks flush, her breath catching. Admire me, she repeated, a whisper. Yes, he said quietly, leaning closer, his lips hovering just near her ear. I care about you. Not just as my partner in this business arrangement, but as you. You are remarkable, and I can't stop noticing it. Her heart raced, and before she could think, he brushed his lips gently against her cheek, a fleeting kiss that sent warmth spiraling through her. She looked up at him, stunned, and he met her gaze with a mixture of intensity and hesitation, as if asking permission for something more. Vivian's breath caught. Andrew, she murmured, her voice soft and unsure. He smiled faintly, stepping back just enough to give her space, but the tension between them was undeniable. I know, he said, his voice low, almost a promise. We'll figure this out, together. And whatever happens, I'll protect you. In that moment, Viviane realized two things. The danger surrounding them was real and escalating, and the feelings stirring between her and Andrew were equally undeniable. Their trust was fragile, but growing, and the sparks of attraction, subtle yet insistent, were impossible to ignore. As they continued working late into the night, shoulders brushing, fingers occasionally touching as they passed papers back and forth, the world outside faded. Danger loomed, secrets threatened to unravel their lives, but in the quiet intimacy of shared purpose, Viviane and Andrew found themselves drawn closer not just by circumstance, but by something neither wanted to fully admit. The night ended with Viviane leaning back in her chair, exhausted, and Andrew gently placing his hand on hers. Rest, he said softly. We face them tomorrow. Together. She nodded, her pulse still racing, her mind filled with thoughts she dared not fully speak aloud. The line between contract and desire had blurred, and both of them felt the pull of something that could no longer be ignored. The next morning, Viviane awoke to the faint hum of city life outside the large windows of their shared apartment. She found Andrew already at the sleek desk in the corner, eyes glued to his laptop, jaw tight with concentration. The tension from the previous day still lingered, a subtle unease that had not yet been resolved. Morning, she said softly, approaching him with a cup of coffee. The aroma filled the room, but her nerves made her hands shake slightly. Andrew looked up, his eyes dark and intense, but softened just for her. Morning, he replied, his voice low. We have a problem. I traced the leak to someone very close to us. Someone who thought they could manipulate the arrangement between us to their advantage. Viviane's heart skipped. Who? She asked, fear threading her voice. It's Elena, not the colleague from the office, but someone higher up, someone who stands to gain from destabilizing both of our companies. She was hoping to use you against me, to make me look incompetent while taking advantage of the marriage's appearance. His voice dropped, almost a whisper, as if saying it aloud made it more real. Viviane felt a chill. She wanted to ruin you. Andrew nodded, stepping closer and placing his hand gently on her arm. And she would have, if we hadn't acted quickly. I won't let anyone use you against me. Viviane. Do you understand? Her chest tightened at the intensity in his gaze. I understand, she whispered. There was no mistaking the protective edge in his words, and it stirred something deep inside her, a mixture of safety, admiration, and an ache she hadn't expected. For a moment, the room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the laptop. Andrew's hand lingered on her arm, brushing lightly against her skin, a contact charged with unspoken emotion. Viviane's pulse raced. She wanted to pull back, to remind herself that this was all a marriage of necessity, but she couldn't. She didn't want to. Andrew leaned closer, his voice dropping to a soft murmur. You're remarkable, Viviane. Strong, intelligent, and yet, there's a side to you that's vulnerable, that I want to protect. Viviane swallowed hard. And if I'm scared, she asked quietly, looking up at him. Then I'll be here, he said, lowering his voice even further, because I care about you. Not just as my wife and name, but as you, the person you are. Her cheeks warmed as he moved a fraction closer, so close she could feel his warmth. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, and the air between them seemed to vibrate with possibility. Andrew brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, and Viviane felt her breath catch. Without thinking, Andrew leaned down and pressed a fleeting, tender kiss to her lips. It was soft, almost hesitant, yet electrifying. Vivian's heart hammered, and for a moment, the fear, the corporate scheming, and the danger outside faded into nothing. She pulled back slightly, eyes wide, and Andrew met her gaze, dark and intense. "I didn't mean to startle you," he murmured, brushing his thumb gently across her cheek. "But I can't ignore what I feel anymore." Vivian's pulse raced, torn between the thrill of the moment and the careful walls she had built around her heart. "Andrew, this is all so complicated," she whispered. He reached for her hand, holding it firmly yet tenderly. "I know," he said, voice low and serious. "But complications don't change the truth. I care about you, Viviane. I've cared since the moment I realized you weren't just part of a contract, but something more." Her chest tightened, a mixture of fear, longing, and exhilaration. I care about you too," she admitted softly, almost inaudible, the words trembling as they left her lips. Andrew smiled faintly, a mix of relief and quiet joy. "Then we face this together," he said, leaning in again. This time, their lips met in a soft, lingering kiss. It was brief, but it carried all the unspoken tension, desire, and trust that had been building between them since the wedding. When they pulled back, both were breathless, eyes locked. Viviane rested her forehead against his, heart pounding, and whispered, "Together." Andrew wrapped his arms round her, pulling her into a protective embrace. "Together," he echoed. "And no one, not even Elena, will come between us." The danger still loomed outside their walls, but inside the apartment, in the quiet of the dimmed office, Viviane and Andrew found their first real connection. Their partnership had evolved from obligation to trust, from tension to intimacy. And though the world remained uncertain, they had found in each other a reason to stand strong. The night ended with Andrew brushing a tender kiss across her temple, a promise without words. Viviane nestled closer against him, feeling safe, valued, and undeniably drawn to him. The lines between contract and heart had blurred completely, and both knew that the coming days would test them further, but now they would face every challenge together. The morning sun slanted through the tall windows of their shared apartment, casting long golden streaks across the polished wooden floors. Viviane stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the city stir below. Her thoughts were heavy with the events of the past few days. The corporate threat, the constant tension, and the subtle fear of betrayal had finally reached its peak, but the knowledge that Andrew had been unwaveringly by her side gave her a small, grounding sense of peace. Andrew entered quietly, dressed in his tailored suit, a rare trace of fatigue shadowing his usually sharp features. He paused for a moment when he saw her, the light catching his dark eyes in a way that made Viviane's heart flutter. "Morning," he said softly, moving toward her. "Did you sleep at all?" Viviane smiled faintly. "A little," she admitted, taking a slow sip of coffee. "But I kept thinking about last night, and everything that's coming next." Andrew reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, a touch so light it felt almost ceremonial. "Today is the day we end this," he said. "We face Elena, face the truth, and make sure she can't threaten us again." Viviane nodded, though a twinge of nerves tightened her stomach. "I've been dreading it," she admitted softly. "I don't know how she'll react, or what she'll say." Andrew placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Whatever she says, it doesn't matter. She underestimated us, and she doesn't realize how much we trust each other." His voice was low, yet firm, a protective promise that left Viviane trembling with a mixture of relief and anticipation. The law firm's office was quiet when they arrived, the tension in the air almost palpable. Elena sat behind a large mahogany desk, perfectly poised, a faint smirk on her lips as though she still believed she had the upper hand. "Viviane," she said smoothly, eyes flicking toward Andrew, "I see you've decided to face reality." Viviane stepped forward, shoulders squared despite the pounding of her heart. Reality is exactly why we're here. Elena, your threats. Your attempts to manipulate us sit-ins today. Elena's smirk faltered slightly. And you think you can stop me? You're naive. Viviane. Andrew, your loyalty blinds you. Andrew stepped closer to Viviane, protective and unwavering. Naivety isn't what stopped you, he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. It's our evidence, our preparation, and the fact that we're smarter than you gave us credit for. Viviane produced a folder from her bag, laying it on the desk with deliberate care. All of your manipulations, every attempt to exploit this marriage, every transaction documented. We traced everything. Elena's eyes flickered nervously to the stack of papers, and her composed mask faltered. You can't prove. Andrew's hand brushed briefly against Viviane's, a subtle, grounding touch as he added firmly, we don't need her cooperation to prove it. The authorities are already on their way. You can either admit your actions or face the consequences legally. The color drained from Elena's face as the office door opened and 2 officers stepped in. Elena Ramirez, you are under arrest for corporate fraud and attempted manipulation, one of them stated, reading her rights. Elena's composure cracked completely. This isn't over, she spat, her voice shaking with anger and fear. You think you've won? Andrew stepped in front of Viviane instinctively, his hand brushing hers again for a reassuring touch. This isn't about winning, he said quietly, voice low, almost intimate. It's about stopping people from hurting others, including us. Back at their apartment, the atmosphere was different, lighter, yet charged with relief. Viviane sank into the plush cream sofa, exhaustion mixed with elation. Andrew sat beside her, close enough that their knees brushed, close enough that the tension from the morning's confrontation still simmered between them. We did it, Viviane murmured, leaning back, eyes half closed. It feels surreal. Andrew's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. We did it together, he said, voice soft. And we proved to ourselves that trust and teamwork are stronger than fear and manipulation. Viviane turned to face him fully, her gaze meeting his. Andrew, I don't think I realized how much I needed someone to have my back until now, she admitted, voice soft and vulnerable. Andrew's lips curved into a small, tender smile. And I didn't realize how much I cared about someone until I saw you standing there, strong and fearless, even when you were scared. Viviane felt warmth spread through her chest. The lingering tension of their relationship, the subtle flirtation, the stolen glances, the brushes of hands had evolved into something more undeniable. The evening fell softly, the apartment bathed in the golden light of the chandeliers. Andrew approached Viviane slowly, a quiet intensity in his gaze. Viviane, I can't hold back anymore, he whispered, leaning down so that his forehead touched hers lightly. Viviane's breath caught. Andrew, he cut her off gently, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her lips. It was full of all the unspoken moments, the tension, the fear, and the trust they had built. Viviane melted against him, her arms wrapping round his neck as the kiss deepened, a slow, deliberate declaration of their love. When they finally pulled back, both were breathless. Andrew brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. I love you, Viviane. Not as a contract, not as an arrangement, but as you. And I've wanted you like this for longer than I realized. Viviane's chest swelled with emotion, a mixture of relief, joy, and love. I love you too, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. And I've been trying to deny it, but I can't anymore. They spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other's arms, laughter, soft whispers, and gentle kisses filling the luxurious apartment. Every touch, every glance, confirmed what had been building since the wedding. Their love was real, deep, and undeniable. In the following days, Viviane and Andrew navigated the aftermath of Elena's arrest with composure. Their professional lives resumed, but with a newfound sense of unity. The danger that had threatened to tear them apart had instead forged a bond stronger than either had anticipated. Andrew, ever protective, insisted on sharing every detail of the corporate recovery with Viviane, subtly including her in decisions she might have been excluded from before. Viviane, in turn, found herself leaning on him, trusting him fully for the first time in her life. One evening, as they stood together on the balcony, looking out at the city lights, Andrew wrapped an arm around her waist. "We survived," he murmured, voice low and intimate. "And now, we can focus on us." Viviane smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Us," she echoed, feeling the weight of fear, tension, and danger finally lift. The contract that had brought them together had evolved into something far richer: love, trust, and partnership that neither could imagine living without. Andrew pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, the city sprawling below them, and whispered, "Together, always." Viviane closed her eyes, savoring the moment. "Always," she whispered back, feeling a warmth and certainty she had never felt before.